Well, thank you for coming, and I'm going to turn the program over to Miss Jean to get us started.
Okay, let me adjust a little bit. Thank you so much for the great introduction, and my name is Jean Sa. I'm the Contract Audit Review Manager with the Division of Local Government Audit. Let's see, I'm gonna put my slides up, just a second. Okay. So next couple of hours, we will talk about internal school funds, contract audit review process, and Sarah and Bethany will tell you about internal school funds manual update. So first, I'd like to tell you about what we do at the Comptroller's office. And Mr. Jason Mumpower is the Tennessee Comptroller. And the Tennessee Comptroller is elected by the Tennessee General Assembly to serve for 2-year term. So Mr. Mumpower was elected Tennessee's 35th Comptroller of the Treasury on January 13, 2021. The Tennessee Comptroller of the Treasury has a wide range of responsibility to ensure financial integrity within the state of Tennessee. So the Comptroller is essentially the state's money cop, and all employees of the Comptroller's office are working to make government work better. That is our mission statement. So we have 12 divisions and about 560 employees. About 300 of them are auditors. The Comptroller's responsibilities include auditing all state and local governments and overseeing property assessments and state and local debts, and research and education, and many more. So as I told you earlier, I'm with the Division of Local Government Audit. Mr. Jim Arnett is our Director of the Division of Local Government Audit, and he's leading our division to ensure all local governments are audited in accordance with the governmental auditing standards. So our county field auditors perform annual financial and compliance audit for 91 counties out of 95 counties. And the Contract Audit Review team is responsible for contracting independent CPA firm to audit 4 large counties and municipalities, other local governments like utility district and public housing authorities, internal school funds, and some nonprofit and for-profit entities receiving grant funds from the state. So our reviewers actually review 1,700 audits filed with our office annually, and also we review CPA firms' audit documentation to make sure they are doing the quality audits. All school systems in Tennessee are either audited by the county auditors from our division or contract CPA firms. And all internal school funds are audited by the independent CPA firms contracting with our office. So when you have questions about internal school funds or any other school questions, you can actually contact our office. And this map is handy when you try to contact our office, and you should know about whom to contact by just looking at this map. We divided the state into 8 areas, and I'll tell you about all those different areas. And first, Tammy Steer is our project assistant, and she sends out like contract audit requests, and also she manages contract and report system, and follows up with late contract and late audits. And Scott already introduced Bethany Wilson. Bethany is responsible for Area A, and she is a CPA and CMFO, and she used to work for the Ohio State Auditor's Office before she came to our office, so she has a great experience in governmental auditing. And Area 2 is covered by Mark Fover. He used to be a county field auditor and transitioned to a contract audit review team. And he is the person who updates audit manual annually. And he's also responsible for Certified Municipal Finance Officer program. Do we have any CMFO here? Yeah, there are a few CMFOs. So. And Area 3 is covered by Matt Pyland, and he is a CMFO also and joined our office in 2019. He covers this Area 3 in purple. And Area 4 used to be covered by Marcy Burnett. She retired in October, but we just hired a new person. He's starting next week. His name is Justin Garcia. And for the time being, if you have questions, you can contact me or any other reviewers closest to your area. Area 5 is covered by Lisa Beller. Lisa is our Senior Contract Audit Review Specialist, and she's a CPA, and she's very knowledgeable about all aspects of our office functions, so she's a good resource. Tim Hardy is another Senior Contract Audit Review Specialist. He handles fraud referrals and used to work for the investigation side, and he transitioned to the Contract Audit Review team. Area 7 is covered by Sue Ann Odom. She has been with our office for 4 years, and she used to work for State Audit, but she came to us. And she's a CMFO, and she covers contract and audit, contract and report system, CARS. So whenever you request a new account, she will approve it with Matt. So if you have CARS question, you can contact her, and she will help you greatly. And Area 8 is covered by Sarah Pope. She's right here with us. And she's a CPA, and she has extensive knowledge in internal school funds because she audited actually internal school funds as a contracted CPA before for 9 years. So she's a great resource for you guys. So why do we audit internal school funds? Because it is required by the state statute. So the law requires that the audit must be performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and minimum audit standards and regulations which shall be prescribed by the Comptroller's office. So we do that through the audit manual. So every audit should be conducted in accordance with GAGAS, we call it GAGAS, Generally Accepted Auditing Standards, Governmental Auditing Standards, and the audit manual. The audit manual is posted on our website, and audits must be performed by the Comptroller staff or contracted CPAs. And Tennessee Comptroller's office is responsible for reviewing the audited financial report. And the audit should be completed as soon as possible after the fiscal year end of June 30, but it has to be filed with our office by December 31st. So as I said it earlier, internal school funds audit should be conducted in accordance with the Tennessee Audit Manual. So Section A of the audit manual gives you general information about audit contracting and reporting. And it says, as a rule, audit contracts should be executed before the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30. However, there's always an exception to the rule. We ask contract auditors to perform USDA procedures for the centralized cafeteria system. So those procedures should be conducted during the school is in session, so we cannot wait until June 30. The contract should be executed by September 30th of the year that is being audited. So for example, you have to submit contract for 2023 audit by September 30, 2022. This is the front page of audit manual. Other sections that are applicable for the internal school funds audits are Section F and Appendix C. Section F is especially written for the internal school funds and cafeteria funds. So this is a good resource that you may want to read it in addition to the internal school funds manual. And Appendix C is for auditors for how to do centralized cafeteria procedures for the school system. So I told you about the contract and report system. We call it CARS. All these contracting and reporting are taking place online, and we do not have any paper anymore. Contract is online, and all audit reports are submitted online, and we do not need paper audit report, and it's just all done by digital copies. So contract and report system handles that all, and it is our web application on our website. So each year, local boards of education must contract with CPA firm and the Comptroller's office to perform the audit of internal school funds. By when? By September 30th, yes. And once a contract is approved, the CPA will perform the audit, and the CPA firm will submit the financial audit report through this CARS system by December 31st. This is the sample copy of the contract to audit. The contract includes audit report due date, which is December 31st. Also, contracted internal school funds auditors should make sure their audit documentation for centralized cafeteria procedures are available for the local government audit step by September 30 after the fiscal year end. So if your county schools have centralized cafeteria system, your internal school fund audit contract should indicate that this contract includes USDA procedures for the cafeteria operations and special provisions. If the contract does not include this language inside the contract, I will return this contract to be revised. So I will just tell you a little bit about our audit review processes. Once an audit is submitted through CARS, our reviewers will check it in, and then one of the 8 Contract Audit Review Specialists will review those reports. And after they review that report against the internal school fund manual, audit manual, and other laws and regulations, they will issue a review letter. It will be addressed to the Board of Education and Director of Schools. And if they have some comments that needs to be corrected, some comments for the items that needs to be corrected, that we require current revisions, so your auditors should submit a different revised report to us. Or if it's not a significant deficiencies, then we just tell you to make a future correction. Why is having an audit so important? Because it is the law. You cannot just you have to abide by the law, so it is important. Also, fraud risk for the internal school funds is high, and internal school funds balance are included in the primary government's financial statement because of GASB 84. GASB 84 requires, because it's not considered as custodial fund, it has to be included in the primary government's financial statement. So your internal school funds report will be incorporated to your city and municipalities or special school districts financial report. I did not show you this. So also audits help keep schools accountable. It's a good management tool, how much you can look at every account balance at one place and how much money left and which restricted account has like negative balances and stuff. So it's a good management tool. So also some people who donate money will look at the audit reports sometimes, and these audit reports are all posted to our website, so it is a public information and it is easily accessible. The Comptroller's Division of Investigation posts on their website some of the statistics of their investigation reports, and you can get a lot of information from this website. I highly recommend you visit this Division of Investigations website. It shows statistics for last 7 years from 2016 to current date. The map on the top shows all the internal school funds investigation report they issued, and the bottom one shows the school support organization report. There have been 43 SSOs report issued since 2016, and 48 internal school funds investigations conducted since 2016, and total of 344 reports issued, and 91 out of 344 was for the school support organization or internal school funds reports. So that was like 26% of all the investigation reports, so that is very high percentage. In total amount of missing funds due to fraud, abuse, or waste was more than $2 million. So before I finish my part of the presentation, I would like to let you know that as a public official, you have a responsibility to report suspected fraud, waste, and abuse. And you can do that through our website. Especially as a public official, you have to click this for public officials link, and then you can use the form specifically designed for the public officials. So I'd like to thank you again for inviting us for the TASBO conference. It is an honor to present at this great conference. And now, if you have any questions, just don't hesitate to contact me through this information. And now I will turn over to Bethany and Sarah. Thank you.
This going. Okay. Please bear with us as we go through getting everything switched over. And all right. Okay. So as we have already seen, there are likely going to be some technical difficulties throughout, so we're going to try and minimize that as much as possible. So I want to start out by saying how excited we are to be here. We have worked on this manual for a very long time, and we're so excited to actually have it out, or almost out in this form. We're not quite there yet, but we're really excited to be sharing this information with you. So to give you an idea of how this presentation is going to go, well, first, can everybody hear me okay? No? Okay. All right, is this better? Okay. All right, so we're excited to be here. We've worked long and hard on this manual, and we're excited to share our changes with you. So just to give you an idea of how this presentation is going to go, Bethany and I are going to tag team this throughout. We worked intricately together on this update, and our presentation is going to reflect that. So before we get started, Jean touched on my background before, working for a public accounting firm, and so I wanted to get my hands on my clicker here, give you a little bit of fun fact. So I was there for 9 years, majority working on contracted audits, with a lot of that being internal school funds. My first day as an intern was actually in a school library on an internal school fund audit. I've worked in many school libraries, in teachers' lounges, and even a school's nurse office a time or two, just depending on where we could be put. I have been using this 2011 version to answer questions for bookkeepers for my entire career. So we also, between working here and there, I know that you all have some of the most specific and intricate questions that we receive. And so we have to do some digging and to make sure we're all providing the best guidance possible. So we're really excited to provide these updates to you all. So we're going to start out with a disclaimer. The opinions that we express, so this goes for both Bethany and myself, that we express during this presentation are our own. They do not necessarily represent the views of the Tennessee Department of Education, the Tennessee Comptroller of the Treasury, his representatives, or the Tennessee Division of Local Government Audit. This is our opinions only. And now we're really going to test our technical abilities with doing a poll. So this is our first time to use this polling software. So if you would, you can either take a picture of the QR code, or you can text TNCOT964 to 22333 to join, or you can go to this website. I think from your cell phone, that's probably going to be the easiest thing with the QR code. It will ask you a place to put your name. You do not have to put your name. You can just skip that. But this is going to allow us to kind of get a feel for our group and make the session a little bit more interactive, and answer some questions that we have. So, looks like everybody's still kind of getting it set up. We're hoping that this is going to work. I think we've had enough technical difficulties so far. So if this goes smoothly, then we're all good from here. All right, so I'm going to bring up the first poll. So we want to know kind of who we're talking to. What area are you from? So we've got East, Middle, and West. Bethany is in East, and she actually prepared this poll question. And so I always say when I'm asking about your area, I'm like, okay, well, West, Middle, or East. So it depends on where we are as to where we kind of start our list. So we're anxious to see kind of where we're covering here, because I know we've got a room full here, and then we've also got several online. So we want to make sure that we can hear from everybody. All right, so it looks like we've got a lot of middle, yes.
That makes sense where we're located.
Yes. So we're, but also we've got the West and the East being able to, I'm sure, either attend a few in person and then also virtually. All right, so it looks like we've got almost 60 that are participating, so that's fantastic. All right, we're going to go to our next poll. Are you excited for an update to the internal school? All right, that's what I like to see. So we feel very excited, but we also know that change can be a little scary, and you don't really know what to expect. So we also understand that people may be kind of biting their nails, like, okay, what's coming? What's going to be asked of us? Is it too much? What's coming? So, all right, we're really excited to see those thumbs up people. And hopefully we can quell those that are a little questionable.
Yeah, Sarah and I are solidly in the
Yes. Okay, so another disclaimer. We want to tell you, be transparent with where we stand on this manual at the moment. So the updated manual is currently being reviewed by the Tennessee Department of Education. We have gone through this, Bethany and I have gone through this manual top to bottom, from side to side, every which way we could come at it. And we have made all of our proposed changes. We have gone through internal review processes. We have passed it on, and it is currently in the process of being reviewed by the Department of Ed, and we are waiting for their final comments on what they want to agree with and what they may want to have changed. So full disclosure, we are presenting on a draft version of this manual. So until the proposed changes have been approved by the Department of Ed, then all changes that we present are considered draft and are subject to change. So we're hopeful you're going to see the majority stay the same. However, there may be some tweaks that are going to come up. We anticipate that the updated manual will be published by July 2023. If we can get it out before then, we absolutely will. And it'll be effective immediately. So we would definitely prefer sooner rather than later, but this is what our anticipation is. Okay, so this is what you've been using for 11 years now. There is several words to this title, and I'm going to be fully transparent again that anytime I have to reference this in email correspondence or I have to write out the initials, I have to bring this manual up to make sure I'm getting them all. Because I'll call it the school manual, but when I want to reference it appropriately, I've got to have that. And so not only is it a lot of words, it's a lot of syllables as well. So it's a mouthful to get this title out. And we are so excited that this is what we're hopeful the draft is going to look like, the final version. So you'll see it's a little updated with the colors from our logo at the Comptroller's office and the Department of Ed. And the biggest thing is the name is shorter. So now it was hopefully, yes, it is hopefully going to be the Internal School Funds Manual. So I can reference that easily without question, and I know you all will too. So when we're responding back in an email, it's like, what is she talking about? I can just say this, and it will make perfect sense. We've also added the Comptroller's logo to the front of the manual because this is a joint effort between our office and the Department of Ed. Our office, through our report review process that Jean touched on, we are responsible for enforcing this manual. So whenever we do our report reviews, whenever we get questions from bookkeepers and auditors on how do we handle a certain situation, we're the ones providing that guidance. And so we have both parties now shown on the front. Okay, I'm gonna share a little personal story with you. Last month, my family, we went to Disney World for the first time. I've got 2 young daughters, and my youngest is 5, Allie Mae, and she was a champ with all of the roller coasters at Disney World. She had her nerves were a little bit there, but she rode just about everything. After her second ride one morning, I think her little nerves were spent. And all the big rides, they spill out into these gift shops at the end. Well, she went straight for this stuffed animal. And we said, you know what, you've earned that. You absolutely can have that stuffed animal. And so it became affectionately known as Yeti Teddy. And Yeti Teddy went all around Disney World with us. Most of the time, it was under her little arm, but also it was packed in backpacks, but it was toted everywhere. I say all that to say, I fully expect, once we have the final version of this manual, that this is going to be Bethany and myself toting this thing all over the place, sharing it far and wide. Okay, so let's get into it. This is how we feel about the changes. We hope this is how you feel too. So just some overall changes that we've done. We've updated the formatting. As I said, we went through this top to bottom, sideways, everywhere we could go. We looked at margins, at spacing, at indentions, all the things, because we wanted to make it easier to read. We want to make it, if you're having this 200-plus page document, we want to make this as easy as possible for you to make it through. We updated the language, so does it make sense when you're actually reading it out loud? We realized that we're CPAs, but you all are bookkeepers, you're in this day to day. It needs to make sense. And we talk a different language a lot of times. So we wanted to make sure that it made as much sense as possible to bridge the gap. And then we also updated for TCA changes. So Tennessee Code Annotated, state statute, state law, a lot has changed in the past 11 years. And so we needed to make sure that the references that were included were the language was updated, and there were also new TCAs that were added that were applicable to schools. So we made sure that we included those, and the manual is very driven by state law. And so I feel like that's very important. I don't think that's truly understood a lot, but I think it's very important to understand that these are not just arbitrary rules. Like, this is actual state statute we're having to go by. And we removed the index. So we were talking earlier about how we use the manual now, and we personally use it in Adobe format, and we use the Control-F search function, and that's fantastic with a manual that large. And we found that some things weren't necessarily needed in the old version. We added Appendix B, C, and D that are hopefully going to be fantastic resources for you all. So it's all new information there. And we've added a separate FAQ document. Now, this is going to be separate from the manual, and hopefully will be able to be updated more frequently than the manual. We do not want to wait 11 years again for the next update, but we do know that it's a massive undertaking to do updates for this. So the separate document will allow us to provide kind of more up-to-date items, questions, and answers for what's actually going on in the world. So just as a kind of general point, the 2011 version was 230 pages. The proposed version is 210. So even with adding new appendices and all of this, we were still able to eliminate 20 pages, and we were very excited about that. And so for the separate FAQ document, I do also want to clarify, for all the questions that we receive from bookkeepers and auditors, if there's anything that results in a lot of research or collaboration, then we'll keep all of those responses in a database. So that way we have those as reference for guidance. We're providing consistent guidance across the board. We have maintained these questions for a very long time. And Bethany, as part of our overhaul of this manual, she combed through every question that we had saved and determined, okay, is this still relevant? Is it something we're seeing a lot still? And so that's where all of these questions came from. They are things that we're seeing frequently, and we want to make sure that y'all have the guidance for. But overall, the existing requirements have not drastically changed. So that is good. So we're not throwing a bunch of, I talk with my hands, so maybe I won't hit the microphone again. So hopefully that will ease some of your fears. All right, I'm going to hand it off.
All right. Sarah said she talks with her hands. I like to walk, but with the virtual aspect, I will try to stay in one space while I talk. So first, before we go into all the changes, and we're going to go basically beginning to end through the manual is kind of our thought process for walking through the changes. Before we do that, I want to take a moment to speak to school support organizations, or SSOs. They are still exempt from the manual requirements. We did not change that. What we have done is in May of 2020, we published a procedures manual for those SSOs because we know there's lots of questions on them. They are tricky. And within that manual, there is an FAQ document specific to SSOs. So if you haven't already, go out, take a look at that. It may be a really good resource for you. One other overarching change we made is related to charter schools. I'm only going to touch briefly on this, but the manual is applicable to charter schools. So we have incorporated references to them throughout the manual now, and they actually had their first audit cycle on this for June 30, 2021. So they should be aware that this is out there. We do have an exception. Charter schools with limited internal school fund activity can request a waiver of the separate audit requirement. I just want to emphasize this is a waiver for the audit and not just for the daily accounting and reporting for these. You still need to track and report these funds. You just may not be required to have the separate audit for charter schools. And that waiver process is an annual process that will be communicated to you, and you would need to request an exemption annually. All right, so going through, beginning to end, like I said, through the manual. So the first one we have resulted in changes throughout the manual was GASB 84, fiduciary activities, which Jean mentioned briefly earlier. So this was effective for June 30, 2021 audits. And what this GASB did is it required the internal school funds to be reported within the primary government's audit report. So within the city, county, special school district, charter schools audit report. So we just, like I said, we updated applicable sections in the manual with our office's recommendation for how to incorporate those funds into the primary government report. So this is an excerpt from the proposed draft. You'll see there at the top for all public charters, all public schools. Our recommendation is that the internal school funds be reported as a non-budgeted special revenue fund, and then for charter schools as separate line items that are clearly labeled. I want to go back to emphasize non-budgeted special revenue fund. So the budgets for internal school funds are not legally adopted, so there is no requirement to present those budgets in the internal school funds audit report or the primary government's audit report. I also want to mention here, throughout the rest of the presentation, we have included excerpts from our proposed draft, so you can see this here. This one here is a final version. Some slides, we've shown a track changes version or a red line version, just if we felt that illustrated our purpose better. But we're trying to show you exactly what we've made, and that way you can see what we're looking at and the exact wording that we're proposing. Also want to touch very briefly on USDA procedures. Jean mentioned this, and this is nothing new. We have just not put it into writing in the manual what the deadline is for those procedures to be completed and submitted by. And like Jean said, that's September 30th. That needs to be completed and available for review by the audit staff of your county auditors. And I'm going to pass it back over to Sarah to go over duties and responsibilities.
All right, so in the beginning here, we're going to be a little bit more back and forth, and as we go on, we're going to have a little bit longer stretches. So the first area with the duties and responsibilities so as Bethany said, we're starting from the top and working our way to the bottom as far as our changes. So this is in section 3 of the manual, and these are not necessarily new responsibilities, but we are making responsibilities consistent across the manual. So what we found as we were combing through was that there were certain responsibilities that were illustrated later on in the manual that were not included in this initial listing. And so we wanted to make sure that we were consistent across the board. And then we wanted to clarify some of the existing responsibilities. So reporting of evidence, local boards of education. So we're gonna go from different levels of management. We'll start at the top. Reporting evidence of fraud to the Comptroller's office. We've added the website, which includes that. So that was already included in some of the other responsibilities, but it needed to be across the board. Completing and maintaining all lease purchase agreements, long-term contracts, and any other expenditures exceeding the bid threshold. Purchasing and maintaining all capital assets, and preparing and distributing all required 1099 miscellaneous forms. Like as we said, these are not new responsibilities, but we've just added the clarification here. Additionally, we have the following policies that need to be established. It is very likely that the board already has these policies established to address these items, but we need to make sure that there are policies regarding electronic collection methods, direct application for grants by individual schools, regarding petty cash, regarding internal schools, fund sponsors that must be school employees, and travel policies, which includes reimbursing school personnel for travel directly related to education conferences, seminars, and employee development or training costs. So all of these, like I said, they're not new necessarily. You likely already have all these in place. Moving down to the director of schools. They need to approve any changes in an authorized purpose of a fundraiser. So if the fundraiser is intended for a specific purpose, but then after it's already completed, there's a change, that has to be approved by the director. And then filing all statements and reviews for system-wide applications required by the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act. Now, speaking of a mouthful before with the prior name of the manual, this is also a mouthful. So we often refer to it as UETA. All right. School principals, they're responsible for, now these are not solely what's listed as duties and responsibilities, but these are our additions that we have added. Approving all fundraising activities that do not involve the participation of the general student population in the marketing process, reviewing all annual statements and schedules, including the annual financial report, and authorizing all bank drafts. Supervising the bookkeepers to ensure compliance with the manual requirements, informing cashiers and sponsors annually of all required procedures and forms, and filing all statements and reviews for school-wide applications required by UETA. So before there was the director that was system-wide, and then the principal is school-wide. All right.
All right, so I'm going to speak briefly to one of our new appendix. We've added references throughout the manual to Appendix B. We feel this is a very key resource for you, so we just wanted to allude to it many times. Appendix B, the working title is Principles-Based Approach to help determine the board's obligations. So what we see through our reviews or questions that come through, it seems that sometimes the local boards are trying to shove some of their responsibilities down to the internal school fund level and ask you to account for those and report those. We don't feel that that's accurate. The current version of the manual does say that internal school fund should supplement, not replace, the local board's obligation to provide a free and public school. So we have realized some of the confusion may just be because there's a lack of guidance. So we've created Appendix B to try and help clarify that. And we'll go over that in detail later in the presentation. All right, we receive many questions related to inactive accounts. So the existing version of the manual just says inactive accounts can be closed, similar to class accounts, either by direction of the sponsor, the class or activity, or if there is no direction, just closed into the general fund. But there was really no clear definition of what is an inactive account. So we have now added that in. So an account may be considered inactive if there has been no activity during the preceding 12 months. So after that, if you consider that inactive, and you can work on closing it out. Now, what if that inactive account has a deficit? So there's two options here we provided in those circumstances. So if it has a deficit, prior to the account being closed, the principal must request the deficit be paid by the Board of Education's General Purpose School Fund, or approve a transfer from the internal school fund, general fund. If an account deficit is eliminated via one of these options, that does need to be disclosed either in a footnote or in a supplementary schedule. The reason for these options is just to be above board. We don't want you routinely running accounts into the deficit and then just closing them into the general fund without anybody really being aware of it. We have made one small change to sponsors. So we received some questions. You can see in the original version here, it said individuals could be sponsors, and we see some questions on, well, is this person an individual in eyes of the manual? So we have now just changed that to, they must be a school employee, because that was the intention. And we've also added in, just to clarify, each restricted fund account must have a sponsor. We were under that impression that that was communicated, but based on questions, it wasn't clear. So we have now just directly stated that. Athletics. Overall, your athletic accounting has not changed. You still have the two options that are in the current version of the manual. What we've done is clarified which fund, general fund or restricted fund, it needs to be accounted for in. So our proposed change is that all athletics must be accounted for in a restricted fund, which most middle schools and high schools do. It's typically elementary schools. Some of them run the activity through the general fund, and we're proposing that needs to move to the restricted fund. And you can see, just based on the existing wording there, money raised from athletic programs is generally restricted for use of the athletic program. That's the intention. We've also removed sanctioned because we think that's what was causing the confusion. And for the purposes of the internal school fund manual, the sanctioned athletic programs don't really, it's not practical. It doesn't have a bearing on our purposes. Internal controls. So I know everyone in here is aware of internal controls, and you can love them or hate them. And we are not removing internal controls. All we've done is we've added in a TCA section just to clarify that it is a TCA requirement for you to have and establish and maintain internal controls. So it's not just your auditor saying, oh, you really need to do this. It is a TCA requirement for those internal controls to be established and maintained, and that is TCA section 918-102. Electronic files and equipment. So we have some recommended policies and procedures. We've made a significant number of changes to this section, and mostly that's because we're working from a 2011 version. There have been a lot of changes in technology and electronics over the past couple years, and there will continue to be a lot more, and this will need to be revised. But we've done our best just to add in a few additional minimum policies and procedures. You can see we've added in physical security and disposal of computer equipment. We've added in some requirements for usernames and passwords and safeguarding those. We did not state it needs to be 18 digits long and have special characters and all that. That's up to your own personal policies. Cybersecurity program that includes security awareness training and the use of a virus detection software. And you should have policies and procedures for protecting personally identifiable information when using electronic collection methods. All right, bank reconciliation. We've added in a sentence which specifies the individual who should receive the bank statement. So the bank statement should be received directly from the bank whether electronic or physical hard copy, by someone other than the individual who prepares the bank rec. The reason we put this in is generally schools have one individual who's responsible for collecting, expending, doing the bank reconciliation, and so this is a mitigating control in place to help with that potential lack of segregation of duties that may exist. And I'm going to pass it back over.
All right, debit and credit card controls. Essentially, when we reviewed the manual, we saw there was a lot of duplication regarding these two types of controls. So we combined them in order to eliminate the duplication, and in doing so, we were able to eliminate 2 pages from the manual. So every time we had some form of elimination of a full page, we did a happy dance. I mean, it was very exciting. For capital assets, we added clarification that the board is responsible for purchasing all of the capital assets, that the capital assets should not be recorded within the internal school fund financial statements, but they should be tracked by the individual schools for safekeeping. So schools may receive donated property that will need to be accounted for. But capital asset purchases must be completed by the board because they have the procedures, the personnel, and the background to be able to complete these purchases correctly. And this is the specific wording that is in our proposed version, just as a specific call out. Retention schedules. So this, before we had a full detail of retention schedules listed out. And we took it down to this version because actually CTAS, which is County Technical Assistance Service, and MTAS, the Municipal Technical Advisory Service, they both have retention schedules posted on their website. And that's authorized by state statute. And so instead of repeating the information here, we just simply put the website that directs you where you need to go. It's in the PDF form, all you have to do is click it and it takes you right there. So rather than including that in the manual, we were able to eliminate 1 page from it. So we really took this elimination very seriously. Okay, next we're gonna be talking about crowdfunding. So we've got a poll and we just wanna know, does your school allow crowdfunding? We know we get a lot of questions about it. We especially did kind of around COVID-ish times. And so we don't know, like, are we all doing it? Or are we, okay. All right. Well, this is a good deal. I don't know either. It could have gone either way. We've done presentations where we've talked about it and the person says, oh, no, we don't allow that. And then some where, obviously we're getting questions about it, so it's happening somewhere. So, okay. All right. So majority is no.
Yeah, so the next slide has the definition on it. Yep.
Yes.
We had to Google it.
Yes.
To make sure we got it right. Or the next one after.
Oh, yeah, after this. Okay, so if you do participate with crowdfunding, which websites do you do? Now, for clarification, don't use spaces or punctuation from the website. When you enter these, it's going to create a word cloud, and the biggest one will be the most used. So this is just our curiosity, because when we were going through, obviously there are all specific websites we're getting questions on, like, is this allowable? Can we use this platform? But those platforms change all the time. And so we needed something that was a term that was going to encompass all of this activity. Okay. All right, so it looks like donors choose. Yeah, is a big one. I have not heard of that either. Yeah, so there are some that we haven't heard of. Okay, yeah, so this is very good to know. Thank you all very much for participating. All right, so crowdfunding. We defined it because we knew this was not going to be a term that everybody was familiar with, because we had to search it out and figure it out on our own of how to encompass all of this. So crowdfunding is the practice of fundraising via the internet. Now, this wording is specifically from the manual. We did not do a snippet on this because it is a lot of words, so we wanted it to be larger and easier to read. But this is where we're just giving you kind of general guidance on this. This is not necessarily new guidance, but this goes from all of the inquiries that we were receiving, and this had been email guidance that we had generated. And so we wanted to make sure that this was housed in a formal, in the formal manual and not just as an email correspondence. So for crowdfunding, more than one vendor should be considered when evaluating potential websites. Items to consider include available reports to support the fundraiser results and the validity of the services offered. So have other schools used this service, and what was their experience? Were they happy with it, or did it stink? You know, if somebody else has used it and it wasn't very good, well, then that's probably a good indicator not to use them. And then what's their Better Business Bureau rating? You know, if it's not a very good rating, that's also a pretty good indicator that maybe you should use something else if you're allowing it. And additionally, the Board of Ed must approve crowdfunding and establish related policies and procedures. So this goes back to some may approve it, some may not. The number of crowdfunding vendors and the number of authorized users should be limited. And we have this full disclosure here, and this is also located in a different part of the manual as well with a different topic, but the use of crowdfunding is discouraged but not prohibited. So this is not our favorite thing for you to do. It's not something we're going to say, hey, we recommend this, we're gung-ho about it. We do not encourage it, but we also do not prohibit it. But this method of fundraising may be prohibited by your board policy. But also, unless adequate internal controls can be established, crowdfunding should not be used. So if there's any question in the internal controls of it, then it should not be used. So we'll go through some of the requirements of crowdfunding. And again, this is specifically from the manual. We have taken this listing down. We've kind of condensed it a little bit for presentation purposes. But the manual is going to expound upon a few of these items, or all of these items, really. So your first requirement for crowdfunding is there needs to be a time limit. There needs to be a clear beginning and ending date for the fundraiser. There needs to be a control account. And it's got to be in the school's name that all teachers will be required to utilize, and the number of authorized users should be limited, as it was mentioned before. And username and password should be safeguarded and should not be delegated to other employees. The donations are property of the school, so any profits should be directly deposited into the school's bank account. A receipt must be issued. Now, this is everything that should be on a regular receipt that you're accustomed to. It's got to identify the payer, the amount paid, the date, the purchase, or the purpose of the payment, and it may be in any form. A website or platform should not be used if a receipt cannot be issued. The online activity should be reviewed by the bookkeeper. So essentially, an independent review of this fundraiser should be able to occur by somebody who's not participating in the fundraiser. And the bookkeeper is typically going to be the person who is not participating. Needs to have vendor reports that should be provided for use in this independent verification process. They should provide the supporting details for all of the transactions. All right, so that covers us with crowdfunding. Like I said, there's additional detail in the actual manual portion. So on to sales tax. There's a few different areas we had changes for sales tax. The first was updating the current language for the TCA, for the state statute, to make sure it was still accurate. And we also removed the temporary sales tax period. Now, this is not something a lot of schools were using. In my experience as an auditor, I did see a few that were using it. We had some as I said, you all give us some very specific questions. And so in fielding some of those questions, I actually had communication with the Tennessee Department of Revenue to go over, okay, exactly what we need to do in this situation. What do we need to tell these bookkeepers on how they need to proceed? And this was a portion in with that question. And it had to do with if a school had no more than 2 resale activities per year, then they didn't have to abide by the sales tax requirements. Well, that is not applicable to schools at all. The school is not considered a nonprofit. And so we made sure that we removed that. It may have been applicable at the time, 11 years ago, whenever it was written at that point, but it is no longer applicable, so we made sure to remove that.
All right, so we're going to spend a minute with inventory. And this mostly relates to large quantities of items for resale, like bookstores or school stores, that type thing. But we've added in, and again, you may already have this in place, but controls should be established to reconcile sales with inventory. So we recommend this reconciliation be performed weekly for ongoing sales, like those bookstores or school stores, or immediately upon completion of the fundraiser. And to aid with this, we actually have created a new exhibit within Appendix A. So we have created an example inventory analysis report. And again, you may already have your own version. This is just one that we've created to help guide you in creating this. And this form reconciles calculated ending inventory to your actual inventory count. This here is an example of our proposed form. So you can see in the boxes, you input your beginning inventory or your purchases. You would remove the quantity sold, and you would have a calculated ending inventory. And then you would input your inventory count, which is your actual ending inventory. And then you would calculate any variance, an overage or shortage, and just properly explain that information. Like I said, this is just an example. If you already have maybe a spreadsheet that works better for your operations and your purposes, keep using that. This was just something we put in here in case you had questions on kind of what we were looking for or what we had envisioned. You can also group items, so there's no need to go and count each individual Snickers bar and Twix bar and whatever. You can group those if they're all the same price, just say $1 candy bars and count them. And hopefully that will help you with some efficiencies in this process. So board allocations. So we've made a few tweaks here. Local Board of Education allocations must be accompanied by an approved budget. The main reason for this is we've noted this is one of the problem areas where it seemed like boards may be pushing some of their responsibilities down to the internal school fund level. And so we're trying to just kind of rein that in a little bit and put some controls on it. And we've clarified that these allocations must supplement, not replace, the board's obligation and must not include items that have been determined to be a board responsibility. If it's been determined to be a board responsibility, then the local Board of Education needs to complete that purchase. And we've also, it's not on the slide here, but within this section, we've clarified any purchases that require bids, long-term contracts, leases, those need to be approved, executed, and maintained by the board. And I'm not sure how aware you are of the changes coming out with GASB 87 leases, but that is one reason too we've made this change. That's a pretty big GASB that's in effect for the June 30, 2022 audits, and it's a little bit of a headache. And so it's best if that information is kept at the board level. BEP. So I'm under the impression you guys have heard a lot about BEP, or now TISA, over the past year. We updated in our proposed version the BEP language to agree to what was currently in the TCA, and that's mostly changes back from 2017 that just hadn't been incorporated. We do fully understand that this will probably need to be updated, potentially before we even get this version out. We, at this point, are not aware of what these changes will be or what they will look like. As we are aware of them, we will hopefully get them into the updated version before it's out and get that communicated to you. So it's on our radar. As of right now, all we've done is updated for current TCA wording as applicable to BEP. All right, Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, or UETA. So this was brought to Sarah's and my attention as we were going through the manual update. And so I was under the impression it was a current or a newer TCA. That is not the case. Looks like it's been around since about 2001. But it is coming to our attention due to the environment that we operate in now with electronic items that are going on. So this is TCA section 4710.119. It requires local governments using an electronic business system that provides for the sending and receiving of electronic records that contain electronic signatures and/or authorizations to file pre-implementation statements and post-implementation reviews with our office. And the email there is where those would be provided to. And the TCA details out clearly what needs to be in those statements and reviews. It is not cumbersome. It's usually about a page or two. So you might be asking what all those words mean. Some examples of what this would apply to would be online ticket sales, electronic collection methods, electronic signatures. And this is just notifying our office of the system that you plan to use or implement, and then I think it's 45 days, but a post-implementation review telling us how it's going and what you've learned from that process. Basically just information gathering by our office. And Sarah covered this in the duties and responsibilities. For those district-wide or system-wide applications, we believe it should be the director of schools that completes that notification. And then for school-wide, we believe the principal is in the best position to be communicating that to us. All right, we do have another one of our polls here, making sure everybody's awake. Which vendor or vendors does your school use for electronic collections, assuming you use electronic collections? This is another one of those word clouds, so try to remember no punctuation, no spacing, and you can input multiple times in case you have multiple vendors. This is, Sarah and I were just curious as we went through the manual what was being used. I'll be honest, I've only heard of like 2 of these. Okay, we are not a good resource if you have questions on these, but definitely talk amongst yourself if you see some vendors that you have some questions about. Some of you apparently have some good research going on. I think, do we still have answers coming in? Yeah. I'll leave it up for another 30 seconds to a minute so we still have some responses coming in. And like I said, this is a word cloud, so ones that have been submitted more than once will appear a little bit larger.
And thank y'all for your participation in this. This is very helpful.
All right, we're going to go on to the next one. Go through electronic collections. This is very similar to crowdfunding and kind of the wording that we used and also where we took it from. So there were a lot of questions that came in over the years about electronic receipts, and during COVID, that really spiked. So we actually sent out some email communication guidance, and we just took that email and condensed it into a manual format. So there's a good chance you have seen all this information already in the past couple years. But as mentioned, that TCA section UETA does require that our office be notified of any electronic collection methods. More than one vendor should be considered. The Board of Education must approve the method and establish any related policies and procedures. The number of electronic collection methods and the number of people authorized to use them should be limited. This is more from a control standpoint and kind of making sure you as a bookkeeper may not go a little crazy if you allow everyone to use their own electronic method and then allow anyone who wants to have them have their own application to them. You can't have solid internal controls, and knowing which receipts need to be receipted and reconciled can get a little hairy. So keep it as limited as you can, and hopefully that can help make your lives a little easier. And then here also is just the standard information from crowdfunding as well. So our office, for electronic collection applications, is discouraged, but definitely not prohibited. But it could be prohibited by your local Board of Education policy. So just be aware of your own policies and procedures. And unless adequate internal controls can be established, electronic collection methods should not be used. We are aware some of these methods they all operate a little bit differently, so your internal controls may need to change based on which method or methods that you're using, what you have in place. So these are the requirements that we've boiled this down to. So one is supporting documentation, as always. Any receipt or expenditure needs to have proper support. So for these items, that would include a listing of individual transactions. This is so each individual receipt could be selected for audit and can be analyzed. You should also be provided a total daily receipt summary. So this summary should include a vendor service fee or fees if those exist. It should show the gross amount of receipts that you received, and then there should be a net amount which should agree to what was in your bank account. Receipts must be issued. So again, all the standard information on receipts, the date paid, who paid it, the issuer, purpose for the payment. The receipt can be in any form. All the platforms seem to have different ways that they issue receipts: PDF, text, email. If it is the electronic collection method is unable to issue a receipt, then you need to make sure to issue a physical receipt, a manual handwritten receipt, assuming it's an in-person transaction. If there needs to be voided receipts, details for those need to be maintained and provided for inspection upon request. And there needs to be a daily reconciliation. So amounts charged and deposited need to be reconciled with that daily receipt summary by someone separate from collections. So just your segregation of duties, internal control there. And that is it on our part for electronic collections. It's not too crazy. Keep sending us those questions as they come up, because each situation is different. We do touch on processing fees. So as mentioned, some of those vendors do charge a fee for using their service. TCA section 91108 does allow the school to set and collect a processing fee equal to the amount paid to the vendor. Or alternately, this processing fee may be waived by the Board of Education approval. Basically, the board would be absorbing that fee as part of using that collection method. Refunds. So the 2011 version of the manual said refunds in excess of $2 have to be dispersed by check. We're proposing to change that to $10. So I don't know how often you guys deal with refunds, but at least from me standpoint, I was very excited about this change. So some of you may feel like this guy, no longer issuing a $3 check for a refund. So I'm, again, not sure how often you guys deal with refunds, but this may be a welcome change. On the other side, travel advances, we have removed that from the manual, so they're no longer allowed. All travel should be on a reimbursement basis. And you can see there the direct excerpt from the manual. The reason for this is it's just not sound fiscal policy to allow travel advances. They pose a very high risk, and as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, internal school funds are risky enough as it is. To open yourself up to yet another risk just didn't seem to be necessary. So this is our proposed change here in relates to travel. And banking. So we have incorporated applicable banking law references. Again, nothing new, nothing that's changed. These have been around for a while. But TCA section 58201 for counties and 656.110 for municipalities. What these TCA do, they require the receiving and evaluating of bids or proposals for banking contracts, banking services. And they do require that these banking contracts be reevaluated every 4 years. So just be aware, for counties, this TCA was created in 2008, and municipalities in 2019. So nothing's super recent at this point. Someone within your district is likely already doing this. Just be aware that these TCAs do exist and that the information does need to be evaluated.
So we are on to section 7 now. So we're making our way down. We added the general report outline. This is what should be present in your financial report. So this is going to come more in line with auditors, your auditors and what they're dealing with, to be more helpful for them. But we have a general report outline in the audit manual, the general audit manual, and then we felt it would be very helpful to have one in the internal school fund manual as well. So you've got your table of contents, your roster of officials, which should include your board members, director of schools, superintendent, management officials that are responsible for the financial statements, and then also principals are optional to be included there. And then your independent auditor's report, and then your combined and individual school financial statements, your notes. Really, why we added this was specifically related to the supplementary information. While we had example schedules in the prior manual, we did not have this explicitly stated, that this information needs to go here and this is what's required to be listed on it. So we really wanted to add that clarification specifically for your auditors who are performing that test work that we're requiring. So for the general report outline, this is our example from the table of contents. This is more going to be applicable to your auditors, but essentially we moved the individual financial statements from supplementary information below the notes of the financial statements up to be part of the financial statements. So they are before the notes. So as you can see, they just went from one place, just kind of shifted a little bit. And this is ultimately to simplify reporting for your auditor. So this is not necessarily something that would be super applicable for your work. Next, fund balance. This is a change in the reporting. So in prior instances, you have got your general fund and your restricted funds. And your general fund was classified as unassigned account, fund balance restricted, was restricted, and your inventory was non-spendable. So you had the different fund balance classifications. With this update, we are going to have all fund balances be classified as restricted. You're still going to have your general fund, and you're still going to have your individual restricted funds, and how you. So it doesn't change anything with how you normally operate. There is just we use the same terms, but they can mean different things. And so we've got to understand the context and be clear in what we're communicating about. So just know your general fund and your restricted funds are staying intact. Nothing is changing with there. It's just how the ending balances are being reported on the balance sheet. And it's due to the external restriction on internal school fund activity. So when there's an external restriction, then it's considered a restricted fund balance. So that will look a little different on your financial statements. So the notes to the financial statements, we made some significant updates, and we also added some note disclosures. So depending on how familiar you are with the financial reporting package, the notes to the financial statements essentially tell the story of the numbers on the financial statement. So if there's anything that is out of place, if there is a deficit amount where it should be positive, then there needs to be an explanation. It just needs to tell the story of what's actually happened, supporting that information. So we made an update to the reporting entity disclosure, and that was related to the GASB 84 implementation with fiduciary activities, where the financial statements of the schools are now going to be included on the primary government's financial statements. We cleaned up the fund balance disclosure, whereas before we had the different 5 classifications of fund balance types with the unassigned, the restricted, non-spendable, all of that. Because we're having the restricted fund balance as the only option, we removed all of those other items because they weren't necessary any longer. And then we updated the disclosure for leases to clarify that they are a board responsibility. As Bethany talked about, there's a lot to the new GASB standard with leases, and you really have to have specialized knowledge in how to implement this properly. And that is something that the board level has. That's not something that you as bookkeepers should be having to deal with. We added an accounts payable note disclosure so that way it's across the board, it's showing that if you do have accounts payable at year end, that we know as reviewers when there's an AP balance, that balance was approved appropriately by the responsible party. And we've added a transfer disclosure and a risk management activity disclosure. So all of these are in compliance with reporting standards. We made an update to, again, we have these very long titles all over the place. So we call this CFA for short, the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards and State Financial Assistance. You see why we shorten it. And we basically just brought this up to current reporting standards. Things have changed a lot since 2011. The schedule on the left is the one that was in the original, or the 2011 version. The one on the right, you see we've removed columns that are no longer needed. We changed some wording, and so it's just overall more simplistic. The schedule of salary supplements, this has to do with the supplementary information that we added more detail with on the general report outline. So we clarified what information needs to be included on the schedule, whereas before it was just an example schedule. So you've got to include the employee name, the amount they were paid, the source of the funds for each of the supplements. And you've got to document if that supplement was board approved and if it had proper payroll tax withholdings. And we added, which I think your auditors are probably going to appreciate this, a $500 threshold for reporting on this schedule. But if this threshold is used, then it must be disclosed at the bottom of the schedule. And then also, if there were no salary supplements that were paid, that fact should also be disclosed. So we should be able to know exactly what happened regarding salary supplements. All right, so we have made it through the meat of the manual at this point. And now we are starting with Appendix A. Remember, we've got Appendix A through D. So we're getting close here. So Appendix A starts with selected TCA references. These are the references we used that help to guide the manual in the creation of it. The ones that are listed here are the new ones that we added. Most of these are not necessarily new state statutes, but they have come into play since the 2011 revision. And we have actually already talked about all but about 2 of these items. So we start there, and we're gonna go over to our next poll.
This is our last and final poll. We do appreciate you guys doing those with us. We've learned some interesting information. This one is just asking if you use any of the existing sample forms that exist in Appendix A. That's kind of about what I was expecting. We took a very hard look at all of the sample forms in Appendix A as part of this update. We wanted to make sure it was useful to you, the information that we are providing. And so you'll see on the next slide, we did remove some of those, we added a few in, and overall we made some formatting changes, because at least Sarah and I, when we started looking at them, we're like, whoa, that's hard to read. All right, we're gonna move on to our forms. So here's an overview of the updates we've made to Appendix A. We added inventory analysis report, which I touched on a little bit earlier. We've also added journal entries for non-cash activity. Sarah's mentioned specific questions that you all ask. Non-cash activity has been a hot topic, and lots of those are very specific, and unfortunately we were not able to address them each in here, but we have boiled these down to some more general scenarios, and we'll go over those here in a little bit. We have removed the vending collections analysis report, the pre-numbered receipt, and the daily collection report. These are all still applicable and required items. We just felt the sample form in the appendix wasn't really useful to anyone. At this point, I think pre-numbered receipt, it's either in the system already or you know which information should be on that, just for an example. So we just took those out to help save some space in the manual. All right, just going over some formatting just to highlight some changes we made. So this is the old version of the fundraiser collection and analysis report. So you'll see some really the big boxes. It's not really clear where some of the information needs to go, at least to us. So we have updated it. Here's the current proposed version. You'll see right away those boxes are gone, which kind of closed your eye in. We've clarified the expected collections and ending inventory calculations to help guide you there on what information needs to be calculated. And we have also tied the inventory amounts to that inventory analysis report. So hopefully you can link those together. And we've added a completed by and verified by lines. So some of the forms had them, some didn't. In our opinion, it's just best practice that if you've completed one of these forms, that you need to sign and date it, that you're the one that completed it, and then someone should be reviewing it just to verify for accuracy. So we've made sure all the sample forms have those lines on them. And here's just a side-by-side view to highlight some formatting changes we made. This is for the yearbook advertising sale collections analysis report. And again, these may seem minor, but we were pretty thrilled to be making some of these formatting changes and kind of bringing it into the current age. And again, hopefully a little more user-friendly. And a final example of just the formatting changes, the ticket reconciliation. So we felt the current version was very confusing. There was lots of lines and not enough space to write sometimes, and it wasn't clear what information had to go where. So we have really modified this form. One of the things too is we've added in the table there to help do some of the calculations. At least to me, now I'm an auditor, but it was more intuitive to have it in a table format to do some math and some calculations rather than in the lines that were in the existing format. I do want to just take 1 second to state the overage under the over-under calculation on the bottom of the old form, that still exists. It's just not shown here on this slide, just because we didn't have room on the slide for the presentation. It still exists in roughly the same format on the next page, so don't think that disappeared. All right, and then our last new exhibit that we've added for Appendix A, this is Exhibit 14 on non-cash activity. Like I said, we've been receiving many, many, many questions on this, usually related to fundraisers. It's kind of amazing some of the ways the fundraisers operate now versus what I had experienced. So we've boiled this down to 3 kind of more general scenarios to try and address and provide the journal entries for to help guide you. So these are vendor issues fundraiser profit as a vendor credit instead of cash, vendor credits issued as a fundraiser incentive or bonus, and then parents purchase gift cards, which are issued as vendor credits, for the school as part of the fundraiser. This here is an exact image of the exhibit from the manual. We're going to walk through 1 and 2 together, the first scenario. 3 through 6 are roughly the same as far as the actual journal entries that need made, so you can just read over those on your own. But the first one, vendor issues fundraiser profit as vendor credit in lieu of cash payment to the school. In that situation, you would record an other asset. We suggest other asset vendor credit. And then you would credit the proper revenue line, fundraising. You need to make sure to record this because otherwise your revenues would be understated. And then when the school utilizes the vendor credit to purchase books for the classrooms, so you would debit the proper expenditures and you would credit that other asset and remove it from your books. And like I said, the other scenarios are approximately the same as far as the actual journal entries that need to be made. When you encounter some of these situations, just reach out to us if you have questions, if still not clear to you on what you need to do for some of these situations that come up. Like I said, it's kind of amazing some of the non-cash transactions that are going on now. And then I'm going to pass it back over to Sarah for our next one.
All right, Appendix B is brand new. And this was as a result of many questions that we were seeing, we were getting from auditors. Jerry Durham, who has since retired, this was something he saw a lot with confusion regarding Board of Education obligations and what should be paid for at the school, what should be paid for at the board. And so we really felt it was necessary, and as Bethany talked about, this is not new information. The supplement not replace is not new information in the manual. This was in the 2011 version, but we just added clarification and hopefully this new resource to be helpful to you all. So this is word for word from the manual. Again, it's instead of being a snippet, it's the text version to make it easier to read since there's a lot of words here. So these principles should be used to determine whether purchases from the general fund merely supplement, not replace, funds necessary for the local Board of Ed to fulfill its obligation to provide an instructional program, property, equipment, and salaries. Each individual scenario needs to be evaluated using a blend of integrity, common sense, a close reading of the manual, Board of Education policies, and fund budgets. So we're going to go through some more of the principles in more detail, but essentially you've got to combine all of this together to determine with making your conclusion. So as I said, it's a principles-based approach. So you've got to include many factors, and it's to ensure that the funds are being used to supplement and not replace. So to start off, we're going to clarify Board of Education responsibilities. These are clear responsibilities. There's no question that this is to be done by the board. So examples include, but are not limited to, paying teachers, principals, bus drivers, counselors, providing teachers with necessary materials and supplies, building and providing a school building and its utilities, providing bus transportation, maintaining and repairing school buildings and grounds, providing janitorial services for school buildings, and any similar expenditure necessary to provide a free and equal education. So those are the known responsibilities, and these are some overarching general rules that you need to remember as you're processing through these questions. The general fund should not be used to replace Board of Education obligations. This is stated in the manual in Section 4, Title 1. The student activity funds should not be used to replace Board of Education obligation as stated in the manual. This is specifically in Section 1, Title 4. A large general fund balance does not allow the school to spend money to replace Board of Ed obligations. This is something we do get questions on. And the Board of Ed cannot make policies that violate these supplement not replace requirements of state statutes and the manual. So the principles in this principles-based approach, I've got 2 slides on this. There are several of them that we need to make sure that we're evaluating in each different scenario. So first, does the manual provide guidance about this expenditure? Does the purchase attempt to circumvent the Board of Ed's purchasing procedures? It's often more difficult to utilize the Board of Ed's purchasing process than to approve and pay for the expenditure at an individual school level through the general fund. But the real question is this the right thing to do? Is the school attempting to spend money because a large fund balance has accumulated in the general fund? Spending money for board obligations is not right, even if the school has accumulated a large balance. Are these types of expenditures included in the Board of Education fund budgets? If so, this will give you an indication of what type of expenditures represent board obligations. Does the Board of Education have any policies related to this expenditure? If so, then this will provide guidance on if it's considered a board obligation, but the Board of Ed cannot delegate board obligations to school by issuing a board policy. This would circumvent the manual's guidance. Does the project require bids? Does the project require a long-term commitment, such as a 5-year lease? Is the purchase amount material to the amount the board is obligated to spend at the individual school level? So I mentioned before about we, as auditors, speak a different language sometimes than what you're accustomed to. So when we say material, that essentially means significant. So is it 25 cents out of $1,000 is not considered material. So is it significant in comparison to what they are obligated to spend at the board level? Is this a one-time expenditure or a recurring expenditure? Infrequent or occasional expenditures may indicate that it would not replace a board obligation. So these are a lot of principles I've just gone over, a lot of words again. So we are going to go through some scenarios and we're going to kind of walk through how we make this determination and all the assumptions that we make. So the first question, can the school buy side chairs for the school office for students and others to utilize while waiting to transact school business? So these are some of the assumptions we have to make. So the Board of Ed is responsible for providing furniture for school buildings. There's not a board policy regarding furniture in this situation. It's not a large enough amount to require a bid. It's not included in the board's budget. Or it is included in the board's budget. However, it's not material, so it's not significant when you compare it to the budget. And it's a one-time purchase. So this is likely supplementing, not replacing a board obligation. So if you're just buying 4 chairs because you need more seating in the office, this is likely just going to be supplementing and not replacing. Can the school pay for buffing the hallway floors? So the assumptions we're making for this is it's the board's responsibility to maintain school buildings. It is included in the board's budget because maintenance costs include buffing floors. The amount it would cost to buff the hallways is not material, not significant. There's not a board policy, it's not large enough to require a bid, and it doesn't require a contract. It's a one-time purchase. This expenditure is likely supplementing and not replacing the board obligation. Can the school pay for new cafeteria tables? So we're going to break this into an A and a B. And all we're going to change is a couple of the assumptions, and you'll see how the response is going to change based off of those assumptions. So first, we're going to say we do know it's the board's responsibility to provide cafeteria furniture. It's not included in the board's budget. There's no board policy. It's a rare occurrence. We're only replacing a portion of the cafeteria furniture, so we're only replacing maybe 2 broken tables out of the entire cafeteria. It's not large enough to require bids, and it doesn't require a long-term contract. This would not be replacing a Board of Ed obligation. Now, same question, different assumptions. We're still, this board is still the responsibility for providing the cafeteria furniture, not included in the board policy, still a rare occurrence. It involves purchasing a significant portion of the cafeteria furniture. So we've gone from two tables to the majority of the tables, if not all. And we're at the point where it does require a bid. This is replacing a board obligation. So you can see between the two, the A and the B, how things change with just a few of the principles to be considered. Can the school pay for painting the cafeteria? So the Board of Ed is responsible for maintaining the buildings, including painting the buildings. It's not included in the budget. There's no board policy. It's infrequent in occurrence. Hopefully this painting lasts a long time. And it's a small repair job in high traffic areas. So basically where the kids are waiting in line for lunch. And it doesn't require bids. This would not be replacing the Board of Ed obligation. However, same question, different assumptions. Still the board responsibility to maintain by painting the buildings, not included in the budget, no board policy, still infrequent in occurrence, but now it's significant repairs. We're painting the entire cafeteria, not just a few walls where the kids are standing and rubbing the paint. So it does require a bid. At this point, we are replacing a Board of Ed obligation. So again, those principles that are listed at the beginning of this appendix will help guide you in how to handle these situations.
All right, I'm going to go over our last two appendices. You guys are almost through, and if anyone else, I'm freezing. So I'm sure if you guys need to move a little bit, keep warm, we will not be offended. But we are almost through. So the Appendix C, allowable and unallowable expenditures. So we receive, many of our questions are about, hey, can we make this purchase? What do you think about this? So we've created this, and like I said, this is just proposed, but we've created this to try and help be a first resource for you to help answer some of those questions. It is a guideline and not an all-inclusive list of expenditures considered allowable and unallowable for internal school funds. All expenditures that your schools make must be reasonable in nature and completed in accordance with the procedures set forth in the manual. And this includes adequate supporting documentation. Auditors love documentation, so always have it. This here is an excerpt of the allowable expenditures. I'm not going to read each of these to you, but you can see listed here. It shouldn't be anything earth-shattering, groundbreaking going on here. Awards, supplies, membership and related organizations for student groups. Basically, as you read through these, the overarching feel is that purchases must benefit the students, not the sponsor, not the teachers. If your purchase is benefiting the students, then there's a very good chance it's going to be allowable. And then here's our list we've compiled of unallowable expenditures. Again, personal purchases for staff, loans, alcohol, tobacco, any expenditure prohibited by federal or state law. Again, all these should be common sense, but now just a resource that you can reference. And going back to that overarching idea, if the purchases are benefiting the sponsor or the teacher, not the students, then you might have a problem, and you need to take a second look at that expenditure. And then Appendix D, definitions. So this is kind of what we replaced that index with. So as mentioned, now in our current environment, most of us are in PDF and searching through the search function instead of using that index. So we've created the definitions. That was 37 pages, just making that switch. So again, we got excited about page changes. This was a good day for us when we got the okay to remove that index. The definitions are just intended to help clarify certain terms and concepts that discussed in the manual. And then our intention is before this will be published, we will hyperlink the terms and the definitions to the most relevant section of the manual. That way if you're trying to research a topic, hopefully it'll direct you to the most appropriate section of the manual. hyperlinks, at least I don't know how, to go to more than one section, so we have to pick the most relevant. But that'll hopefully help with your research. And this is just an example of what we've got from the definitions. And that is all we have for the manual beginning to end. So I think if we're right on time, we have about 10 minutes. Is that correct? I think? 6 minutes? Okay. All right. So we are close. Questions? Are there any that we can try to help answer now? That was a lot of information. Yes?
Owners choose profit and loss for items received. A lot of people thinking that they don't need to report that. They asked for $700 worth of stuff and they got it. They need to do profit and loss and how does that work?
That is,
Donors choose, is this like teacher wish list? What?
It's a crowdfunding.
The crowdfunding?
It's crowdfunding where a teacher will go in and say they have a project and they need a bunch of wiggle chairs or desks or something like that. And it's funded, they get that stuff sent to the student.
And they're thinking they don't need to report that?
Some of them, yes.
Okay, yes, they have to report that, yes.
So they need to put for profit the value of what they got.
They have to follow all of the requirements that we've listed here from top to bottom, if they're gonna use that.
for
Goes
items.
anywhere in the non-cash activity, wording.
Mhm.
It is.
Yeah. Yes, it is. That should be, a roundabout, you should be able to find an example in the non-cash that will address that. But yes, absolutely. And then once this is published, then I personally did this as an auditor, and I told my bookkeepers, I said, anytime you have, we're telling you as auditors, this is what you have to have. Oh, I'm sorry. Anytime as auditors that we would tell somebody this is what you have to have to the bookkeeper, always print out the page of the manual and show it to the teacher that may not be wanting to participate in it. Say, this is what's required, this is what the auditor is going by, and this is going to come back to you if you don't follow what's required. So yes, they must report all of that.
I believe it is. You're meaning ACH receipts into your bank account? You can. You need approval for the ACH payments, I believe. Oh, sorry, repeat the question. I'm sorry. If you can receive ACH receipts and ACH payments, you can. And I believe that might be very minorly addressed in the current version of the manual. We did, I think, just basically add it into the listing of receipt options, so cash, check, ACH. Just make sure you're following any internal policies and procedures related to that. And if you're going to do ACH payments, I know we added in like automatic bank drafts. Those need to be approved. I believe it's annually. Yes. Yeah, by the principal.
So you said that funds should not be used to benefit the sponsor, the teacher, whatever. So a coach is placed in an order for, let's say, warm-up gear for the basketball team. And in that order, he includes the same outfit for each of the coaches. Is that right?
That's right.
I feel like that was a gray area. I can't remember exactly what the. Can the coaches gear? Yeah.
I believe yes, right? Yeah, so yes, they can in that situation. So, sorry, repeat the question. I am sorry, this virtual thing. If you're placing, say, a uniform, can the coaches and also get like a warm-up suit as well as the student athletes? Yes. What we were seeing is maybe, and this deals with non-cash and promotional credits. So the vendor would maybe give them a promotional credit, and then the sponsor was using that for some additional item for themselves specifically, and the students didn't also benefit in that. That was more where we were seeing issues with. Just one item for the entire team, including the coaches, is okay.
So if students are paying, or players are paying for theirs, the coach should have to pay for his too.
Yeah, so the question was if the students are paying for their maybe uniforms, the coach would have to pay for theirs too. Yes, yes. Sorry, over here.
And also, if we do run out of time, we'll pull up our contact information. Please email or call us with, you just flick through. Please email or call us because we know these questions are very specific. So we want to make sure that we're getting the full detail to give you the best response. Yeah, they're okay.
Repeat it.
Are the short-term leases, can they be handled at the school? And we're saying yes.
Okay, so the questions about refunds and refunds through electronic platforms, that is a very good question, and I actually haven't thought about it.
I haven't, no.
We should have, so we will need to make some updates to our proposed draft, I think. Yep,
Yeah, we'll have to think
our answer is we will think about it.
Salary supplements, you noted that you need to document if they've been board approved. Do they all have to be board approved? So like, for instance, if a school employee is being paid for keeping the score at a ball game, supplemental payment that may be paid through the district office, reimbursed by the school, but does that have to be board approved?
That's essentially being well, the question is about salary supplements and if essentially a teacher is being paid for just anything small, if that still has to be board approved, yes. But essentially when they're writing the check, they're saying, okay, we're approving this payment to this staff.
Pre-approved by the school board, it just has to be followed through the district office.
Yes, and it's got it, so it'll have their signatures off saying, we approve of this.
One question before we take more. We're at time. Do you want us to stick around and take individual questions? How do you guys want us to handle this? Can we go over a little bit and answer some more? We can go to 11, you think? All right, we'll take a couple more questions and we will stick around afterwards because we know this is a hot topic and there's lots of items to go over, so. All right, I've seen you with your hand up for quite a while, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to repeat that just real quick. The questions on salary supplements, those that are charged back and covered by the internal school fund, even the payments take place at the board level. Those are what we're talking about for that supplementary schedule that need to be disclosed.
Okay, the other question was, I know your releases out there, with GASB 96 coming up, software as a service, is it anticipated that will also be the same, that it's not going to be the school?
Let you handle it. Yes, they're going to be board level. Speedos are going to be board.
Oh, you made a moment about
Okay. Question was about GASB 96. It's very related to GASB 87 leases. 96 is SPEDAs, if I'm correct. Yes, our recommendation is going to be board level on those as well. Okay, sorry, I'm going to go to the back.
So the question is regarding refunds, and they're a district who does not use petty cash. So essentially, the only option would be issuing a check. Is that correct? Okay. All right. All right, Scott.
Yeah, if you can distinguish like capital assets and that umbrella between the department, Board of Ed that engage in the purchasing process, and where the expenditure line is different. Because the Board of Ed goes through the purchasing process with R&D,
Well, the capital assets the questions regarding capital assets and the processing of the expenditure. So the capital asset's going to be purchased at the board level. The expenditure is going to come at the board level.
Well, what if the school raised money for a specific purpose, like a playground? Fixed asset requires Board of Ed approval because it's permanent fixture. However, it doesn't supplant Board of Ed's obligation. Board of Ed still provides a playground. This fundraiser just supplemented the playground. However,
Here.
$27,000 playground lease.
Okay. So Okay, so this is one of our frequently asked questions from the separate FAQ document, and I think this may address what we're talking about here with the specific donations. So can the internal school funds be used to purchase or upgrade playground equipment? So if donations are specifically received for this purpose, as is what I'm understanding from your question. Yes. So fundraiser donation being used intermittently, then those donations can be used for that playground equipment. So, okay. You're welcome. I thought I'm pushing buttons.
No, I'm pushing.
Okay.
Sorry. You've had your hand up for a while. Oh.
Mine is about bank reconciliation. We now are able to print our bank statements offline or online, electronically. And you said, I think that we cannot do that anymore?
So you print your bank statements from the bank account. That's a mitigating control that someone other than that performing the bank reconciliation should be directly reviewing, receiving, accessing the bank statement. Basically, that way it can't be manipulated by one individual through the whole process. So just make sure whoever's maybe printing that is separate from the person performing the reconciliation. Yep. We'll stick around for questions. Thank you. And we do appreciate the questions. They have what fed into the manual. And
Yep. Thank you.